John, Anik, and Kenny Florian podcast. John, Anik, and Kenny Florian.
I f***ing love them. I can't get enough of them.
Let's hear that Boston next.
Big jab there from Duffy, and Frank Mir is hurt now. Down goes Duffy, out cold. Frank Mir does it again. Rock'em sock'em robots here. Oh my goodness.
Hyperbole.
There are a couple of absolutely self-involved bull artists.
Here are your hosts, John, Anik, and Kenny Florian.
It is always nice when a UFC fan goes back and watches Frank Mir versus Todd Duffy, and then they tell us they think of the Anik and Florian podcast. And how could you not? Great to be with you. Monday, July 3rd, 2023. It is episode 419 of the Anik and Florian podcast, presented by DraftKings. We are live on the DraftKings network. We're on the DraftKings YouTube channel. Clips, of course, on the Anik and Florian podcast YouTube channel. And on the audio side, this podcast is everywhere you normally ingest your shows. Ken Flo, looking dapper, collared shirt. It looks like some sort of football kid of some kind. But, I mean, the beard's coming back a little bit, but it's like the hair's groomed. We got a haircut. We have a collared shirt. You look like you're dressed for some occasion.
Well, it's your birthday, of course. That's why. I'm dressed up. Happy birthday. Mr. Anik. Dude, how are you feeling? And thank you, by the way. This is my Real Madrid kit from many, many years ago. But how are you feeling, kid? Are you feeling
doing good?
What's
I'm
going
doing
on?
Yeah, I'm 45 years old today. I'm repping my Sean Sheehan, SevereMMA.com, striking and grappling and aggression and control t-shirt today. Yeah, 45th birthday today. I was born at 4:07 a.m. on this day in 1978. And, yeah, I feel okay. You know, my twin brother and I obviously have the same birthday, one womb, you know, one placenta, all that stuff. And we have noticed that there's a lot of white coming in on this side of the face and the beard as we get halfway between 40 and 50. But we have got a ton to get to today. So enough about all that. I am happy to report that I am back at my home. I got AT&T fiber optic. I got the best upload speed in the goddamn neighborhood. I have a fiber optic cable that just got buried to the right of my house right here. And right now, we have new Anik and Florian podcast signage being put on the wall in the home studio upstairs. Stands to reason later this week, our second episode of the week, will be live from the new home studio. But a lot to get to today. We'll start our preview, of course, of UFC 290 coming up this weekend. A lot of things to get to. We have the UFC Hall of Fame induction ceremony coming up on Thursday. We have a UFC fight night to recap, a PFL controversy to discuss. But I do want to open the show with an announcement for our listeners and our viewers. Drum roll, please. Kenny Florian wheels up to Las Vegas on Thursday. He's meeting me in the fight capital, and we are going to do a live broadcast of the Anik and Florian podcast this Friday on the UFC Fight Pass stage from the artist formerly known as the UFC Fan Expo, now UFC X. Very excited to see you in person and to have an hour with you live in front of all these great UFC fans coming up this Friday, the 7th of July.
I can't wait, dude. I'm looking forward to it. First of all, we've never done an Anik and Florian live podcast, so this is huge. I hope people who watch the podcast, especially, and new fans, of course, we would definitely want those, are able to come out and have a listen, and it'd be great to meet all the great fans out there in Vegas, and it's exciting stuff, man.
We've been on that stage together a couple times prior, but we were doing Q&As as broadcast partners. We weren't doing the Anik and Florian podcast. The first episode we ever did of this show in TJ DeSantis' studio in Southern California was live April 9th, 2015, but live in front of an audience is something that we've never done. We've talked about doing a show, of course, at a bar, and we are hoping to get to England, and we've started to lay the foundation for doing something like that. And I hope I'm not stepping out of turn here, but I do believe Remember the Show with Bilal Muhammad and Jason Anik is going to be on location at some point during International Fight Week, but we're very excited to be there. And also of note, we are counter-programming my broadcast partner, Daniel Cormier, right? So 1 to 2 p.m. on Friday, July 7th, on the main stage at UFCX will be DC and my beloved friend, Emmy Award winner, Ryan Clark. So DC and RC are going to be on the main stage 1 to 2 Friday, July 7th. We'll be on the UFC Fight Pass stage. Make your selection at any time, but come over to our booth. We want to have the bigger crowd. We're counter program in DC and RC coming up this Friday. All right, a lot to get to. Big weekend for Sean Strickland. We'll get into all of that. Really a great UFC fight night from the Apex. So much to unpack on all of that. But, some of our listeners bemoan the fact that a week ago, during our busy recap show, we did not address this PFL controversy, and that was not intentional. I actually came on the air and had no idea that it even existed. So for those, Kenny, that don't know about everything that's going on with the PFL show from a couple of weeks ago, there was a fight between teammates, Raush Manfio and Natan Schultz. They're very close. They arrived at each other's bracket in the tournament, and as such, a fight played out that, to my understanding, was more of a sparring session than an actual competition, and a controversy now involving Shane Burgos has reared its ugly head, and as its lead analyst, I guess you're kind of in the middle of all of this.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd love to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. So we had two teammates. And not only were they two teammates at American Top Team, these guys are best friends. They're literally godfathers to each other's kids, right? At one point when Natan Schultz had won the PFL championship, he was supporting Raush Manfio, who was like, I forget exactly what he was doing. I think he was working at a hospital, trying to make ends meet, really wasn't making any money as a fighter. So these guys are like brothers, basically, right? And a decision was made at some point to have these guys fight. And candidly, I'm not sure I loved that idea of these guys fighting at that stage of the game. Maybe later for $1 million, that would be ideal. And these guys knew that this was a possibility. Way back when, a couple years ago, when I first started becoming a part of the PFL, there was talk about that. Like, hey, you guys might fight each other. What are you guys going to do if this happens? And they always said, man, hopefully it's for the $1 million, yada, yada, yada. And that was something, of course, that they kind of dreaded, right? It happened. They were paired up in this fight. And basically it really wasn't even a sparring session. Like it was less than a sparring session. It was like if you were sparring with little gloves and you definitely didn't want to hurt the other guy. That's what was going down. Now, you can understand that. These guys are extremely close. The problem is it's in a professional athletic setting. And I think that, when you have something like an organization that is trying to put on fights for entertainment purposes, the fans want to see an actual fight. And in their contract, in the PFL contract, they are supposed to give it their all. Obviously, there's a lot of other reasons for that. One of them, which is people gamble on the sport, right? People are trying to pick winners. And if you have some kind of either an agreement or fighters that aren't giving potentially 100%, you could get into some issues. And I understand both sides of it. This is not easy. But on the PFL side, I'm sure they saw the fact that, hey, you didn't uphold that end of the contract. You're supposed to give it your all. You're supposed to actually go out there and fight. It was clear to anyone who was watching that fight that they weren't really fighting. And I think that's where the problem lies. Now, the PFL decided to say, okay, well, Natan Schultz, you ended up beating Raush Manfio here, but because you didn't give it your all, because you didn't uphold your end of the contract, we're taking you out of the tournament. You are not going to advance, and we're going to put in the next guy who had the most amount of points after Natan Schultz, which ended up being Shane Burgos. Now,
the prize signing, right?
Exactly. That right. Was the big signing, right? Came over from the UFC. There was, obviously Shane is a star in the mixed martial arts world. Lost to Olivier Aubin-Mercier in the first fight of the season, made 0 points, ended up winning his fight against Yamato Nishikawa, earning 3 points. And people are saying, well, this was clearly because they wanted Shane Burgos in the tournament. Well, no, he lost. I mean, that's what happened. And I think that no matter what, it wasn't like they picked Shane Burgos out of a hat and go, oh, we're going to put Shane Burgos in there. He was the next guy with the most amount of points. And that's kind of how he got into the tournament. It's tough. This is a really tough situation for everyone involved. I feel really bad for Raush and Natan that had to fight each other. This was, I'm sure, a very difficult decision for the PFL as well. But I think at the end of the day, the fighters knew what they were getting into, and they kind of were playing with that very fine line of competition and the legality of their contracts. And it's a crappy situation all the way around. Burgos is in the tournament now, and that's where all this controversy lied. Was this a big conspiracy by the PFL to put Shane Burgos in there? No, I don't believe that. Right, that's silly. Right. I think that these things kind of happen, and if there was someone else with more points, that person would have advanced. And I think that at a certain point, the organization needs to put some kind of, they felt they needed to put some kind of penalty on people who may do that in the future. Because if you don't penalize someone like that who did that, then other fighters are going to go, well, we did the same thing, and now you're putting it on us. So there needs to be some kind of punishment, I think, to let other people know this isn't going to be acceptable. We can't have this in a professional setting where people are betting on the sport.
Yeah, and the PFL, and thank you for setting that up, and you did so beautifully. And I have so many questions. It's very rare I get to lean into an MMA controversy, right? Because this has nothing to do with the UFC, but the PFL did release a statement and articulated it was very clear that Natan and Hausch did not meet the contractual standard in that bout. PFL immediately suspended both fighters from the season and have deemed the fight to have 0 points for purposes of league standings. And as such, Burgos was the next in line. And I do wonder internally how American Top Team thought about navigating that. Forgive my ignorance. And I know my guy Clay Collins in the tournament as well. Was there a way to have avoided this matchup?
Yeah. I mean, basically, these fights get picked. They get matched up against each other. And, that's kind of where I'm not sure I would have gone with that, matchup. If guys are going to actually fight, in my opinion, it would have been probably a better fight for $1 million than it would have in the lead up, where you're trying to accumulate points during the regular season. I don't know that, though. And perhaps the PFL, in their mind, they said, well, maybe we want to avoid this situation. That could potentially happen. This happened, there was another terrible fight way back in the day. I was not a part of the PFL at the time. Philippe Lins, who was now, I don't know if he's still in the UFC or not, but he was a part of the PFL, and he had another matchup with someone that he was teammates with, and it did not look good. It was one of those where did someone throw a fight or someone kind of... So, again, I think the PFL wanted to avoid that altogether, but here we are, two teammates getting paired up. I think the biggest thing in the future, I think that for any organization, especially in a situation like this where people are trying to advance into the playoffs, there's a lot of money on the line. I don't think you should have two fighters from the same team in the same division in the PFL. I think that's one of those things that you kind of have to just take out just to avoid any issues in the future. And I think they were able to I don't know. I just think that with something like that, I think that's the easiest way to do it. Just don't have two fighters in the same division who are from the same team, let alone, best friends.
Right. And that's the rub. Best friends, godfathers to each other's respective children, right? Yeah. We had a fight recently in the UFC, Loic Rajabov, who against Esteban Ribovics. And one of them was like, yeah, we trained together. And the other was like, yeah, we're not really teammates, right? So there's obviously a huge spectrum when it comes to teammates. But in this instance, these guys thick as thieves. There's absolutely no reason that they should be competing. Yeah. And at John_Anik, if you were someone who bet on this fight on either side, or if you happen to bet over 2.5 rounds, right? I so wonder about the preamble leading up to this fight and if there was any sort of groundswell of communication from the MMA handicappers and the sharps who are regularly betting on this sport, right? I was so embedded in that UFC show in Jacksonville that I wasn't even paying attention, but I'm curious if Natan was indeed favored. And when you do talk about that light at the end of the tunnel, right? That pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, the $1 million at the end of the tournament. I think this gets particularly sticky when it comes to this being a round en route to the 7-figure payday. I'm not sure if there was a gentleman's agreement between the two athletes as to one guy was going to win. Like, did they have a plan as to which guy was actually going to win?
Right. Well, that's what we don't know. And the way that they fought is suspicious of potentially it going that way. And I think that's where the PFL needed to step in. This isn't some, big thing to try to get Shane Burgos to advance. If they went out there and fought and it was fine, Natan Schulte would have advanced. Like, Natan Schulte is a 2-time PFL world champion. They would have been perfectly fine with having Natan Schultz advance. The big issue is with the way that they competed. I saw some of the things that Luke Thomas put out there, some of the things that Luke Thomas put out there, and some other people. It isn't going like that. It isn't like, oh, we're going to remove this guy because we want this guy to advance. Like, I don't know. I don't think it makes a huge difference with Shane Burgos in there or not from a ratings perspective or trying to get him to be a world champion. That division is stacked. Like, there's some really tough guys. He already lost to Olivier Aubin-Mercier. So anyways, I think the big issue also, the other thing we have to put into context, imagine being on the other side of the bracket and having an absolute war and maybe having injuries and going, these guys didn't even take a heavy leg kick. They didn't take any shots to the head. And I have to advance with my injuries and bruises. And these guys, Natan Schultz can advance and he didn't take any big shots, And so I could see the other fighters' perspective who are competing in this tournament to say, hey, that's not fair. So again, people need to look at the big picture. Like so many things are nuanced. And, for a guy like Luke Thomas, who I definitely respect, smart guy, been around the sport for a long time, to just pick on that angle and go, this is the reason, this is the situation, and I'm not seeing it from all the perspective. Like, no, give the whole thing. You have to look at the big picture and not just look at this and go, oh, well, this was clearly, the organization trying to put a guy at the forefront. So anyways.
Yeah, I think a lot of Luke's message was that this wasn't fighter first of the PFL, and I'm not sure that is wholly true. So at some point during the broadcast, you're saying like these aren't even real punches. I just have to ask you for my own personal curiosity, and it's my birthday, so I'm going to ask, right? How hard is it to commentate a fight? Like at one point you're realizing maybe what's going on acutely, and you're having to call this fight. Like that's an interesting navigation, I would think.
It was very difficult, John. You're seeing these guys, they're going out there and competing, and you're like, okay, are they making it a grappling fight? Or is he just trying to be nice? Is he doing enough to get a certain reaction out of Haush Manfield without hurting him? And, you're seeing the kind of responses and strikes. Like Haush at one point would throw a strike a little bit harder than Natan Schultz. Like Natan Schultz was clearly holding back. He was being a very nice guy. He was being a true gentleman to his best friend there. And Haush was being nice too. Like Haush can hit very hard, but he really wasn't trying to knock out or hurt Natan Schultz. He was trying to get a reaction and trying to get out of these very difficult grappling situations or positions, but they weren't really going at it. For us, we were all just kind of very confused and waiting for something to happen. Like, is the action going to kick up at a certain point or so it was just very confusing and it was difficult to manage, but I think we tried to do our best to be as honest as possible. And by us, I mean myself, Sean O'Connell, and Randy Couture. Yeah. So it was tough. It was tough because you do want to let the fans know that you're seeing the same thing that they are and you're as confused as they are.
See, Randy Couture celebrated his 60th birthday recently.
Yeah, dude. 60. The man's a legend. He doesn't age.
He does not age. All you PFL commentators, with the exception of that play-by-play guy, look like you're 18 with this. I'm just kidding, Sean. OC. I love you, buddy. Just kidding, Shawnee. All right, let us get into UFC Fight Night, Strickland versus Magomedov, if we could. So Sean Strickland by TKO at 4:20 of round 2. Thankfully, that eye poke in round 1 did not become the note on which this main event ended. And a lot of people are calling this Sean Strickland's best performance. I do love the way he works defensively and offensively off of that jab, and comfortable in a fight doesn't even begin to describe it. I mean, the UFC Apex obviously is Sean Strickland's home. He's competed in a lot of big fights there. I do look forward to him competing in front of fans who can really enjoy everything that he brings to the table. But before we get into the whole body of work and how promotionally this man has stepped up, this was a guy in Abu Magomedov who a lot of people were putting on a pedestal. Finisher, got this main event, and I'm not sure if this is a case of levels to this game, but Sean Strickland holding serve as a near 2-1 favorite, and at the very least preserving his spot there in that middleweight top 7.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, even though it was a short fight. I think that, the eye poke was unfortunate, and it was a bad one. It could have been very, very bad. I'm glad that Sean was able to tough it out and compete. If there was one guy who was going to be able to do it, it was Sean Strickland, just as tough as nails. I do think that he was struggling with the overall kicking game of Magomedov. Magomedov was doing a great job of attacking the body, attacking the legs, keeping him at bay. And Sean was kind of waiting for those long-range attacks to subside. And also, I think he was still feeling the effects of that eye gouge at the end of round one. But to me, this was a lack of discipline, a lack of patience and composure by Magomedov that allowed an absolute assassin and killer in Sean Strickland to get in and take that purse. Like he allowed him to get back into the game. Why? Because he did not pace himself. Magomedov was so fixated on trying to get that finish. Why? Because he was actually successful against Sean Strickland, but he forgot that Strickland does not go away easily. He's like herpes. He will come back and reveal himself over and over again. And Strickland just, went into juggernaut mode, started chasing him down, and in classic Sean Strickland fashion in round two, just took over. He was much more defensively sound. I think Magomedov stopped throwing kicks because they were very energy intensive, or it seemed that way anyway. And once Sean Strickland found that Magomedov was losing that steam, he took over and just overwhelmed him with pace, pressure, took over that space in front of Magomedov, and Magomedov mentally, physically, spiritually could not handle Sean Strickland in front of him with all that pacing. And I thought this was a great performance from Strickland to show how durable he is. We knew that. And also his ability to adjust in a fight, I thought was impressive.
Almost as impressive as the way you sort of laid that out. I really don't have much more in my notes, nor much to add, but Magomedov just gassed, right? Like, the reason why I stopped short of suggesting this was Sean Strickland's best performance is because with respect to Abus Magomedov, he looked like me at the Gettysburg College Tough Man competition, right? It's hard for me to remember a main event athlete, a non-heavyweight, Kenny, noticeably, visibly looking so amateurish in terms of the gas tank. And you're right, he realized a lot of success in round one. And perhaps his approach was just 7 minutes hard. I'm going to finish him or I'm going to get finished. But those visuals were particularly bad, I thought, in round two. Like just even before he ultimately gave up, and perhaps I shouldn't put it so strongly. I don't know if he quit, but it looked to me like not good body language at all. And even before he kind of gave up, like it was just so wild and undisciplined. I don't know, man. Like I think Sean Strickland has earned a title fight. But the only thing that gives me pause was just that the B side in this, the blue corner, only showed up for 7 minutes.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that this is when I'm looking at this fight, I go, skill-wise, Magomedov is a problem. He could potentially beat Strickland because he's highly skilled. The problem is he's highly inexperienced as far as UFC experience. He's out in Germany training, no offense, Germany, but your mixed martial arts, experience, gyms, all that stuff isn't at the quality of, let's say, Brazil, United States, right? And I think that not having that high-level fight experience, not fighting under the bright lights of the UFC, it absolutely matters. And it doesn't matter what you do at a period of a round. It doesn't matter what you do in a round. You have to be able to sustain that at a high level for 3 rounds or 5 rounds if you want to be of a elite UFC caliber. And he showed that he didn't have that ability to pace himself or understand that. He has Sean Strickland in front of him. This isn't just some other dude out of Europe. This is a guy who knows how to stick around, and he's going to come back and bite you in the ass if you allow him to. So he just didn't manage his energy, his work rate, got a little too excited there, and it failed him. So hopefully he's able to learn from this because he is a very highly skilled fighter. Just needs to know how to put it together and get the conditioning and composure to be able to fight and beat guys like Sean Strickland long term.
So I know you were expectant that I was going to ask you today if Sean Strickland, on the strength of this win and everything else, has done enough to earn a championship opportunity. I believe that I can convince you right now that Sean Strickland should get a title fight, even if you expected to give a different answer when you showed up today to do the Anik and Florian podcast. Now, with respect to the future Hall of Famer Robert Whittaker, who is fighting Dricus du Plessis in about 5 days, the thought that that fight would either be quick or not violent enough for one of those two gentlemen, either Whittaker or du Plessis, to fight Israel Adesanya in 8 or 9 weeks, second week in September in Sydney, Australia, sounds very ambitious to me. But let us historically look back at Sean Strickland, right? He had that long winning streak that included a win over Brendan Allen, vaults to number 4 in the world. And you know what? Yeah, I'll fight the unranked Alex Pereira at UFC 276 when Adesanya fights Jared Cannonier. Sure, because Sean Strickland will fight anybody, you know? So he gets put to sleep by Alex Pereira, and then he comes back and loses a split decision to Jared Cannonier in a close fight. And now all of a sudden, Sean Strickland's 6-fight winning streak is a 2-fight losing streak, right? Then he steps up during fight week into a main event against Nassourdini Mabov in January, wins that, and now wins another main event against Abus Magomedov. To me, that makes Sean Strickland undeniable. Not only has he stepped up for the promotion, but he can sell a fight. Meritocracy, I certainly think he checks a lot of boxes. The only knock against, and it's been echoed by Luke Thomas and other people, is that if Sean Strickland fought Israel Adesanya 100 times, you know, maybe Strickland wins a few, but for the most part, people feel like they know how that matchup is going to go. And perhaps I get more excited about other matchups in terms of competition, or maybe the betting line would be a little bit tighter. But for me, Ken Flo, with respect to Dricus du Plessis and everybody else, I don't know how you deny Sean Strickland when you couple the body of work with him stepping up and a stoppage win in the main event this weekend. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. Listen, I think that the UFC and the middleweight division in general are in a bit of a bind in that they need competition for Israel Adesanya, who is one of the best fighters to ever compete inside the UFC's octagon. That's the issue. And I think that from a skill perspective, if I'm being honest, I don't think Strickland has a whole lot to offer someone like Adesanya. Adesanya is an absolute menace. He is so skilled and so good and so long for that division that it's going to be difficult for anybody to go out there and give him a good run. I think Cannonier, from a skills perspective, is a better matchup. Now, he has more work to do. And so basically, for me, it's between Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland. Now, if Dricus goes out there and beats Whittaker, I think that would be extremely impressive. No one just goes out there and beats Robert Whittaker. However, I think Strickland, name-wise, style-wise, I think it's a better fight for the UFC to put on between Sean Strickland and Israel Adesanya. So I think that for Dricus, I think he's a tough dude. He's a grinder. He's going to get in Israel's face. I like that would be the case, but from a skills perspective, I don't think he has much for Israel Adesanya there either. So I think it would be a much better, much more entertaining fight for Sean Strickland. And he's the only guy left at this stage of the game because of Israel Adesanya's, level of competition and what he's done in that division. I think that's really the only play at this stage of the game. Dricus would have to go out there and absolutely dominate Robert Whittaker bell to bell and go out there and get a finish for him to change my mind. Not that I'm making fight to the UFC.
No,
but, yeah.
Right. No, I like how you set that up. I don't know if we've seen Sean Strickland fight Marvin Vettori. My memory escapes me a little bit. I think that matchup piques my interest, but right now, obviously, Vittori's coming off a loss, so that fight doesn't make sense right now. I do think a main event or a 3-round co-main event on pay-per-view between Jared Cannonier and Brendan Allen, as called for by Brendan Allen, makes a shit ton of sense right now. If Cannonier's going to earn a second championship opportunity, I think he's got to beat a guy like Brendan Allen. And I think with respect to Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland, Brendan Allen is intriguing because of the danger factor in myriad areas of mixed martial arts. I do believe if Brendan Allen and Israel Adesanya engage in a ground fight, caution flammable for the champion Izzy, but I don't think that the promotion sees Brendan Allen as a number one contender type, at least right now. And lastly, I'll say plenty more on Robert Whittaker and Dricus du Plessis later in the week. But Robert Whittaker, only losses in the last 9.5 years to Israel Adesanya, right? Stephen Wonderboy Thompson got him in 2014. And, He has not lost to anyone but Izzy since. All right, star of the show's been in the waiting room for 3 minutes. He's probably ready to kill me. Let's get to the Ray Longo Minute.
It's now time for the Ray Longo Minute.
I want you to punch a hole in his fucking chest. That's what I want.
The Ray Longo Minute. Starring Ray Longo. The John, Anik, and Kenny Florian podcast.
Hey.
There they are. Happy 4th of July,
There
my
we
guys.
go.
How we doing?
We're doing well. How are you doing?
Yeah.
I just need a little more headroom. My
Yeah,
God.
we need your whole head in there.
Oh, shit. I don't know what's
That
going
sounded
on
terrible,
here.
by
My
the
head.
way.
So, I mean, I know you tan
geez.
well.
Jeez, what am I doing?
I mean, Cody,
Sorry,
can we
guys.
get this guy framed up before he comes on next week? Is that too much to ask? You know? I mean, this is
Where are
absurd. What are we doing?
There,
Like,
look at that.
you got Ray
All right,
4
we're
minutes ago. What have you guys been doing back there? There we go.
I've been, you know what I've been doing? I've been listening to you guys. Beautiful explanation of what's going on in the middleweight division. That's what I've been
He's
doing.
buttering
I've been
us up.
enjoying myself.
He's buttering
I've
us
been
up.
enjoying myself.
Did you fall asleep in the sun?
No, definitely not.
Gosh, you look,
Why, do I look
you
tan?
look great. But yeah, you look
Oh,
tan.
thanks. Holy shit. This hasn't even been any sun.
So there are a lot of people, as we bring the great Ray Longo into our conversation on Twitter. He is at Ray Longo MMA. There are a lot of middleweights who have had a crack at Israel Adesanya. Sean Strickland has not had that opportunity. And when you look at the varying spots in which he stepped up for the UFC, either willingly putting his number 4 ranking on line against Alex Pineda or the short notice week of main event against Nassourdini Mavov. Like, if you're looking for someone to fight Izzy on September 8th, you know, maybe Izzy's minus 700, but Strickland checks a lot of boxes, and he's certainly deserving to me.
Look, I think he fits the definition of a company man, like you said. And, you know, even before we get started, man, hats off to Strickland, because it's tough enough to wake up on the morning of a fight, just feel great and want to, you know, everything's going good. But 10 seconds in, you get your eye poked, man. That shit just bothers the shit out of me, man. It's right, Kenny. I mean, it's tough enough. I don't care what the little thing is. You might have a little nagging injury in your middle finger or your pinky or something that just could distract you. But to get your eyes poked, man, I do. They got to do something about it.
Wasn't a casual one. Wasn't a casual one either.
Oh, no, that guy had his guy's hand is out like this. I mean, Kenny, you're doing self-defense. That's my first thing. I'm going that you're getting my fingers in your eyes. There's just no question. It'd be stupid to do anything else.
Absolutely. Bruce Lee was big on that.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you do? It doesn't matter how tough you are. If you can't see, it's kind of hard to fight. Yeah.
Problem. So my hat goes off to him. I think he deserves the shot. We know he's tough enough. He's kind of got a predictable game, but he's real good at it. And you never know. I mean, it'd definitely be an entertaining fight with shit talking and all the stuff going on. So I say make it. I think he earned it. I mean, and another thing is, too, I was thinking about that. Who was the guy he fought? What was his name?
This past weekend?
Yeah.
Abusmagomedov.
Yeah, who's his manager? Do we know?
I don't know.
We should hire that guy. One fight in the UFC.
Main event, yeah.
I want to know who the guy's manager is.
Right.
This guy deserves an award. No? Is it me?
I mean, I think that's fair, right? That's quite the ascent. I mean, we can't even get Dennis Bazooka in the UFC. Never mind. You know, did you see your guy stepping up, by the way, to try to get that slot against Jack Della Maddalena?
Who stepped up for that?
Dennis Bazooka threw his name in. Of course he did, but no, he didn't get the opportunity.
Yeah, right.
They gave it to an undefeated guy, some 7-0 kid, former LFA guy, I think out of New Jersey, maybe high school wrestler, but yeah.
Oh, he's thrown his name into every one of those. Yeah. I think the one he wanted was Brito too, and they took the other guy. So I think that was a mistake. But
So Sean Strickland, we'll see. All I can tell you, based upon my knowledge of the Aussies as a fan base, they would be absolutely thrilled to have Sean Strickland descend upon Sydney with everything that he brings to the table. Like, be goddamn rock star over there, you know, get him a rental motorcycle and Sean Strickland will take over. And also, too, and we're going to have picks later in the week, but like, Ken Flo's not going to pick Dracus du Plessis at plus 320 to beat Robert Whittaker, okay? Like, Dracus is a huge underdog, and I can't wait to sit down with him. I think he's a big game player. We'll see what he does with the challenge. But yes, if this dude goes out and does to Robert Whittaker what essentially no one's been able to do, then yeah, the conversation can be reopened. But I don't know. I think it's a lot to ask twofold for Dracus, Ray, right? To beat Robert Whittaker, but to beat him quickly enough or non-violently enough where you're able to turn around in 8 or 9 weeks and train and prepare for Adesanya. It's just a lot, man.
Listen, I don't think it could happen, but I've been wrong before, and this would really surprise me.
Well, I speak in superlatives, right? If Dracus du Plessis in a span of 9 weeks beats Robert Whittaker and Israel Adesanya, be the greatest 9-week stretch in the history of the sport. So,
well, I tell you, you should get a tattoo of something of South Africa on you, because I think you're pretty safe that you don't have to do it. But
all right, yeah, we'll do it. We'll do the tattoo bet today. We'll do it. So if Dracus du Plessis between now and September 9th beats Robert Whittaker and then Israel Adesanya become the undisputed UFC middleweight champion. And careful putting it past him too. Yes, I will get the South Africa flag tattooed somewhere on my body.
The whole back. I want back piece, like the whole thing, shoulder to shoulder, dude. Yes.
Yeah. TBD on location and such. But yeah, I mean, I just think that's huge ask, right? To beat Whittaker and then turn around and beat Izzy 9 weeks later.
John, that's more than a huge ask. That's more than a huge ask.
All right, so a few things I would like to get into, Ray, and I don't know how much you watched of this UFC fight night, but Grant Dawson has definitely taken his game to the next level since I love this Grant Dawson package. 12 minutes of control time, and this is Damir Ismagulov that he was able to do this to. So your thoughts on Grant Dawson shining in the co-main event, Raymond?
Yeah, it looked absolutely fantastic. I mean, if there's anything I'm thinking, I'd like to see one more high-level fight. I mean, this is a guy that wanted to retire, or I think he did retire. He's probably been thinking about retirement. So I don't know if that plays into it, but 100% a very technical, good striker. And Grant Dawson made it look easy, and I think that's 100% the first step in getting to where he wants to go. So he looked great. I love the control time. He did it. He did what he had to do, and I think he did it looking really, really well. So against a great talent. So I'm excited to see where he's going for sure.
Yeah, Kenny, what are your thoughts at Grant Dawson? Not just Saturday night, but I would think he'd be problematic for a lot of these guys in that top 10 of 55.
You're asking the dummy who picked Ismagulov over here? Yeah, man. Ismagulov didn't do a damn thing in that fight. I mean, he was absolutely dominating.
Well, he was retired. Fight. He had retired.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he forgot to unretire. He forgot to unretire before the fight.
Kenny, I think that's the problem. Even if you picked him, and I think that's not a bad thing. It's just that you don't know the mindset of these guys. And if you think about it, you just – somebody knew what was going on. You know what I mean? They knew if he was in the camp the right way, he wasn't, but it didn't look good. And, but I don't want to take away from Grant Dawson either, because the guy we've seen Ismagulov do really well. So, again, hats off to him. I'm sorry for interrupting, but I don't think you were wrong in picking him. Yeah.
Thank you for helping me feel a little better about my stupid pick. But, Grant Dawson, I think mindset or not, though, Grant Dawson just had a style that was just something to contend with. Damir never had an answer for the takedowns. He didn't have an answer for the back game. He just didn't know what to do on the ground. Dawson just absolutely overwhelmed him. I thought that Dawson looked like a completely different fighter in that he's way more efficient with his wrestling. He knows how to utilize his striking, get in, get out. When he's in, he's all the way in. He's putting you on your back. He's controlling you immediately. All the little things. We talked about the fundamentals of Ilia Topuria. Well, we got to talk about the fundamentals of his grappling game, because he was doing all the little things right, and how you finish a takedown, how you control, and how you advance your position and never let that dude really out of there. I thought it was a extremely solid performance from Grant Dawson, who was looking better all the time. Those are the skills that he needed. When I look at Grant Dawson from a couple years ago to where he is now, he's filling in those gaps. Still needs some work with his striking, right? If he can't get that takedown, he needs to get that up to a higher level. But as far as how he's maximizing his strengths as a fighter, I thought that was really well executed the other night.
Yeah, and fight IQ wise, very, very smart. So, and it looks like he's in a great spot the way he spoke. And he's, sometimes you just need the right fit, and you get the right attention. Look, a little attention goes a long way. to a fighter, right, Kenny?
Yeah.
If you're doing it by yourself, and then you every so often somebody looks at you, but if somebody's on your ass every day and you're communicating, that's a huge, huge thing. Huge. You know, people just want to feel like there's people behind their back. You know what I mean? That people have their back and they're with them the whole step of the journey. So it looks like he's got that now, and that's why I'm excited for him.
Yeah, and no matter who we are, how much we love martial arts, we all have blind spots. We can't see it all, and we need other people to come in and tell us, hey, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that, you're making a mistake here, there's so much to mixed martial arts. If you don't have good people around you who really want to see you get better, and if you're not honest about yourself and how you want to get better, you're in big trouble. This sport's way too difficult.
Way too difficult.
I just love the way Grant Dawson handled everything, just watching from afar, the media before the fight, the post-fight interview afterwards. I'm a sucker for when they put over the coaches like that. And, when he said, like, I'm not a good fighter, right? I'm just a good soldier. He had me eating right out of his hands. All right, so when I look at the lightweight top 15, Raymond, you got your guy there, Matt the Steamroller Frivola at number 14. By the way, it looks like Frivola is going to be on our live show that we do. We're doing a live show this Friday from UFC X, but you're not going to be in Vegas. Looks like you might be there the week later.
I am there the week after.
That's right. Were you not? And that's a trip that maybe you weren't expecting to make. Is that fair to say?
Which one? The one after?
July 15th. Or did you always have somebody on that show?
No, I always had somebody on that show.
All right.
Not Nazim Sadikov. He's looking great. Very excited for him, but we could talk about that later. But no, we've always been there. Okay,
so Mateusz Gamrot 7, Arman Sarukian 8, Rafael Dos Anjos is still there, Jalen Turner 10, Dan Hooker 11. Those two guys are fighting this weekend. Renato Moicano 13, Frivola 14, Michael Chandler 5. We'll see, right? It is hard to get. Just ask Arman Sarukian. It is hard to get a fighter ranked above you at 155 pounds to sign on the dotted line. Got big names everywhere in there, but Grant Dawson's getting one of those names. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, where is Grant Dawson ranked?
Number 15.
So he's right behind Frivola?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good fight, too.
But then one of the names that Grant Dawson mentioned was Beneil Dariush. I think that makes a ton of sense, even though one's off a win and one's off a loss. All right, a few other things I'd like to get into on UFC Fight Night, and then I would like to ask you, if I could, about Henry Cejudo's unceremonious withdrawal from the Cheeto Vera fight in Boston. Let's just get into that right now because, Aljo called him a dirty little weasel, and I'm not even sure that that's overly strong, just based upon some of the things that Henry has done to inject himself into these conversations, right?
100%, yeah.
Goes through a 5-round championship fight. And I have to be careful, right? Based upon my job.
Yeah.
But he goes through that 25-minute fight with Aljo in May. And then Aljo essentially gets bullied into turning around quickly to defend his title, for lack of a better verb, right? Strong-armed if you like that, right? And then Cejudo starts saying, hey, if Aljo can't make the walk, I'll fight O'Malley for an interim or whatever, Then he accepts this Cheeto fight, and it was hard for me to wrap my head around him actually fighting Cheeto on August 19th. And before we can even send the fight card to the masses, he pulls out of the fight. So if I'm the undisputed champion, Aljamain Sterling, I'm grabbing a microphone and I'm hot. And that's exactly what the result was from your guy. So what are your thoughts on Cejudo accepting the fight with Cheeto Vera and pulling out essentially 90 hours late?
Yeah, it's just more nonsense, MMA nonsense. I don't know.
Yeah,
like, again,
it's a good way to put it.
If you think of Aljo's position, Dana got up there and said, I got to call. Guess who called? Henry. Henry called. He said, if that pussy doesn't want to fight, I'll take this. This is all fucking bullshit I could do without. I'll be honest with you, John. It's stupid. It's almost like second grade name calling, childish shit. Henry, fuck Henry. You know what I mean? Like, that's why Aljo's mad, because he has to sit there and listen to this. Aljo can't get out of his own way. No, Henry can't get out of his own way. Let's grab the mic and put him on blast. So what? Anybody could say, I'll fight him. I'll do this. I'll do that. You got to actually do it, though. That's the problem. So I feel for Aljo, and I back him 100% on everything he's saying, because it's if that never happened with with Dana saying Aljo can't get out of his own way, and Henry called, and I don't know, did Hunter Campbell run over to Dana's house this time and say, you're not going to believe this, Henry Cejudo's out of the fight? I don't know, man. It's just they got to stop, man, with this shit. And Henry, look, if that never happened, Aljo's never saying that. That's my belief. And an injury's an injury, and you got to respect that. But I don't think he was ever fighting, if you want to know the truth.
Yeah, Kenny, I didn't intend to have some long form conversation on it, but I don't know, man. The champion, by and large, has done everything the right way, and I don't know, just some of the stuff coming out of that Cejudo camp, I think, leaves a little bit to be desired. And let me be crystal clear that this has nothing to do with my relationship with Ray Longo. I looked at the entire bantamweight division, right? And Corey Sandhagen and other guys that go about everything the right way, and even some maybe criticizing May-Rob, who all of a sudden decides to have what was a very invasive surgery. I don't know, man. I don't know. It didn't sit well with me how it all went down, Kenny. I don't know if you have any thoughts on Cejudo's withdrawal or any of that.
Yeah, so Cejudo he's out of the fight for what reason? He's claiming an injury?
Shoulder.
Okay. A shoulder injury. Okay, that's what I thought. All right. Yeah, it's tough, man, because here we live in this world where if you find any weakness as a fighter, some of those guys are going to try to poke, especially if it's something that the UFC organization has said, or, it's like, I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that the UFC isn't so keen on having Aljo as their champion. And I think Henry Cejudo is trying to poke at that and make it worse and trying to poke at that wound more and more. And, and here he is now not able to fight. It's a tough situation, man. I hate to see that level of trash talk. The UFC is a much different place than it was when I was fighting, I think. And, to see Cejudo now, I don't know, maybe it's karma, whatever it is, but it's unfortunate that he isn't going to go out there and fight after he said he was going to fight. But I think Cejudo's a fantastic fighter, man. I think having him as a part of the division, though, is much better than having him not be a part of the division.
I agree.
And that card is so damn stacked, luckily, that, I don't think it's going to be a huge dent as far as, viewership or anything like that. I love the card regardless. So Boston has a tremendous card. I think people are still going to go nuts over it. It's still going to do great numbers, I think, numbers-wise, pay-per-view wise. So I don't know, man. I think the proof is in the pudding. Aljo's going to be there. God bless. I hope, God willing, he stays healthy and all that stuff, and that fight happens. But interesting how it all turned out.
And far be it from me as a non-fighter, Ray, to suggest that Henry Cejudo accepted the fight knowing he probably wasn't going to be able to make the walk. But as an MMA fan, just watching from afar and how he was handling his recreational time after the Aljo fight, it just seemed ambitious, idealistic, and unrealistic that he was going to fight someone as dangerous as Chito Vera here on as short a timeline as Aljo was going to have for O'Malley. It made no sense. I was not at all surprised to see him pull out.
Yeah, and again, no, not really disrespect to Henry. I do like Henry, but I think you gotta. I don't like the bullshit talking. I don't, and this is the reason why. Because then when it backfires, you look like a complete asshole.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And I don't think he was winning that fight with Chito. That was never going to be an easy fight. Even if he takes him down, Chito could open him up with elbows to the head. He's pretty good off his back with that stuff. That was not an easy fight. He wasn't going to hurt Chito standing up by no means. I don't believe. It's just, when I see my guys subjected to unnecessary bullshit, I just get a little wacky. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
And I not two wrongs make a right, but I understand Aljo's frustration and having to sit there. And I think he takes all the criticism as well as anybody can, and he's done it for the last couple of years. And I think it actually gives him strength. So I think Henry pulling out actually is going to give him more strength in this fight. I think it gives him another purpose.
And just like that, Raymond has blacked out. I did have one more question for him, but it's probably a good time to stop it down with Raymond Peter Longo. Well, UFC 290 is going to be big, ladies and gentlemen. International Fight Week 2023 Championship doubleheader. Will the all-time great Alexander Volkanovski remain the top dog, or will the interim champ Yair Rodriguez usher in a new era at featherweight? You can place your bets for UFC 290 right now on DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of UFC. New customers can bet just $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly, and everyone can take the action to the next level with DraftKings same fight parlays. All you need to do is string together multiple bets from the same fight for a shot at an even bigger payout. Perhaps you attack that flyweight championship title fight. Brandon Moreno, about a 2-1 favorite. You can bet on the outcome, props like total strikes landed, in which round will the fight end. The Sportsbook is your oyster, so you download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. You use the code AFPOD. New customers can bet just $5 on UFC 290 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Only this Saturday on DraftKings Sportsbook with code AFPOD. Download the DraftKings app now. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER in Massachusetts. Call 800-327-5050 or visit gamblinghelplinema.org. In New York, 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Tennessee and Kansas, gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. In West Virginia, gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. All games regulated by the West Virginia Lottery. Please play responsibly in partnership with Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 21 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/MMA terms. All right, so a few other things that I quickly want to highlight here from UFC Fight Night. By the way, my man Chepe Machine Gun Mariscal is coming up here in about 5 minutes. It looks like we have Longo, so I wouldn't mind actually bringing Longo back.
Well, I at least want to say goodbye.
Well, no, let me ask you this, and
I'm sorry.
we have 2 more minutes.
Yeah.
So Kenny got to the UFC when he had just a handful of fights.
Yes.
This weekend, we had a guy, Nursultan Ruzaboyev, beat Bruno Ferreira in his UFC debut to kick off the main card. He's won 9 consecutive fights. He's 6'5" at middleweight, right? Jeez. He's 35-8-2 with 2 no contests, right? So he's got 47 pro fights. So it took him 45 plus fights to get to the UFC.
Wow.
And I want to ask you guys in the context of Shane Burgos and other fighters saying, why is it the UFC and nothing for the UFC or nothing for all these fighters, right? And here we have a guy, Nursultan, right? If you've seen the movie Frozen, by the way, Weaselton, this guy, he's got to go Nursultan. Forget the last name. But all this kid wanted to do, Kenny, was get to the UFC. And so he was asked in his post-fight interview about making this UFC debut. This kid has essentially fought multiple times a night, every week, every month for years and years and years, for 10 years, just to get to the UFC. And then he has a debut like this, gets a performance bonus. I bring it up in the broader context, right, of other promotions trying to sort of close the gap on the UFC. But pretty damn special to have a kid like this, Ray, who has a one-track mind to get to the UFC. He's essentially fighting every week for a decade to get there, and then has a moment like he had Saturday night. I'm not sure if you saw it, but it was pretty special.
Yeah, I saw where he caught the kick and knocked him out. That was the fight, right? Yeah. I mean, from what I saw, he looked great. As far as the UFC, look, man, people could say whatever they want. There's a reason why people want to be there. I mean, you're going to get the most eyeballs on you. They do a fantastic job with the behind the scenes stuff. I mean, the transportation from the airports.
Yeah,
there's really, honestly, nothing to complain about. We sit here because, we want to make jokes and have conversations about stuff, but they are by far the best organization on the planet, and that's why people want to be with them. Conversely with that, I think sometimes the promotion could have certain liberties because they kind of know that, so it makes it easy for them. But you can't disagree with or be dissatisfied with anything that they do. I'm telling you, from picking you up at the airport to taking you back to the airport to you guys are so professional on the microphone, everything. The other organizations are good, but I've never felt what I felt with the UFC. And it could be because I'm there 30 years at this point, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it just feels like home to me, but I understand why people want to be there. And trust me, I got fighters coming up, and if you even offer them something else, now I want the UFC. I mean, it's just they do a great job with the marketing. They just do a really good job. The other organizations are fantastic also, but they just don't have the dollars that these guys have to do the little things the right way, I believe.
Yeah,
anyway.
no, I think there's a lot to be said of that. There's a lot of power in those three letters. And even the fighters making 12 and 12 to a man, to a woman, come into the fighter meeting and they're just wowed by the staff and the entire operation. And Kenny, I would say, as a guy who has long worked for the underdog, right? When I was doing radio in Boston, I was on Sporting News Radio Boston and not WEEI. Nobody was listening to my show. I was doing the Mouthpiece Boxing Show. Nobody was listening. Like, I have spent a lot of time working for number 3 or number 2, working for the underdog as opposed to the favorite. And, you know, it's kind of nice for me at this stage of my career to work for the favorite. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, the UFC has been around for so long. And why is that important? First of all, experience. They're going to work out all of those problems, issues, mistakes, mishaps that they've had over the years. If you're doing a business properly, you're going to make that better, more seamless, all that stuff. And the UFC has been doing that. The other thing is, you know, being first to market. You know, they were the first guys doing this. So of course they are going to be the biggest. They've been on the biggest networks. They've been promoting it the most. And all of that money, all of that promotion has paid off now to the point where they are the biggest powerhouse out there. You know, I think that there's going to be other options for people. I think there's the perception of, you know, being in the best promotion in the world. You know, for a lot of fighters coming up, watching the UFC, that's where they want to be, you know, of course. And that's where, you know, the majority of the best fighters in the world are. That's just a fact. You know, the good thing is, though, that there are options, you know, for people who maybe are at a different point in their career, coming up, in the middle of their career, the end of their career. There are other options for organizations. So I think it's a good time to be a professional mixed martial artist right now. It is. No question about it.
And a little disclaimer, I've been to the PFL. Those guys treat me like gold, man. I got some really good friends over there. Everything's good. I've had guys fight there, but I've never cornered. So I'm not speaking, you know, directly. I'm just the show I saw you at, Kenny, at the Garden was absolutely fantastic. The ambiance was good. Everybody's doing a great job. They really are. But the UFC was first. They have the money behind them, and they really do a good job on some of the little things. So there's other organizations, like even with the COVID policies, got tortured for no reason. Like the UFC just came through beautifully in areas where they hit a couple of bumps, man. They got down, they did it the right way. And I don't know, that's again, anytime I'm complaining for my fighters. As far as organization and people at the UFC, absolutely love them, always will. I always feel like home there. And again, half of this shit is just, you know, to get people to curse you out on the comments and, you know, all of that stuff. So but, all the organs, like Kenny's right. It's just a good time if you're an MMA guy. But they've done that's how good of a job they've done, is that's the first thing people say, I want to be in the UFC. You know what I mean? So you got to give it hats off to them for they did a great job with branding. I mean, and it's just the way it is. And, you know, they deserve everything they've got. You know, obviously I'd like to change a couple of things, but take my position. But that's it.
No, I like the way you laid that out. I also work for Bellator, so I've spent a lot of time working for Bellator too.
Scott Koch is a great guy.
Yeah, I didn't work for
great
Scott.
guy. Known for years. What a just down to earth nice guy. So it's just I'm going with Kenny. It's a good time to be an MMA fighter. And,
I was part of the Bjorn Rebney Bellator regime, not Scott Coker. But
we have nothing good to say about him.
Hey,
you know, your mother said, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say nothing.
Don't say it at all.
Hey, I'll call you later this week. We appreciate your contributions as always.
Awesome, man. Yeah, definitely. I got a couple of things to tell you too, so definitely cool. All right, take it easy, guys. Happy 4th of July.
Thank you, buddy. Ray Longo, minute every week here on the Anik and Florian podcast. I'm going to call him later today and see if I can get him to wish me a happy birthday, since he didn't seem to want to on the show. We will circle back to a few other headlines from UFC Fight Night. I know Kenny's going to want to talk about Michael Morales before we bounce on out of here, but now joining us on the guest line. I'm very excited for this today, ladies and gentlemen. Less than 2 weeks removed from the biggest win of his career, he is UFC featherweight, if I can call him that. Chepe Machine Gun Mariscal, my man, welcome to the Anik and Florian podcast. I appreciate you waking up early for us. Congratulations. It's good to see you. What has the reaction been to that UFC debut, and has your life changed at all since June 24th?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on, first of all. And yeah, man, it just, everything's kind of a big change. Right after my fight, I had to move apartments right away. So I moved in a day. I had to go pick up my son in Philly. I had like 8-hour flights. Like, I had no sleep for the first week coming back. My phone was blowing up, from friends and, other fighter friends and the family. So it was pretty cool. It was kind of like if everything laid out in place the right way. I moved into my new place, getting things organized, showing my son a whole new lifestyle. It was funny because every time we were in the airport waiting for our flights, people kept coming up and taking pictures with me. And my son was just like, why they take pictures? I'm like, bro, I fight in the UFC, I fight at TV, and I show him videos of me fighting, but he doesn't believe me, he believes my partner is more of a fighter than I am. Right. So I'm like, finally I showed him like my UFC fight, the whole fight. And he goes like, man, I had no idea, he was kind of stunned. Then he was like glued to me the whole day. So yeah, it's just, I'm getting, I guess, what I deserve,
I think that's a good way to put it. You're getting what you deserve. And speaking of having no idea, like, I'll be candid, I had no idea who you were until this fight materialized. But as I was preparing, I ran into a lot of people who were like, I'm telling you, Chepe should have been there a long time ago. And when you look at the strength of schedule, now you've won 4 straight fights, and we'll get into some of the schedule in the past fights against guys like Gregor Gillespie and Bryce Mitchell. But this is the longest winning streak of your career. So something has clicked, and I don't know if you can pinpoint anything that has been the difference, but clearly you have found something of late. Why are you in a better place now stringing wins together than maybe several years ago when you were trying to get to the UFC?
So it was definitely a like a feeling check, like I had to get my feelings checked out and really controlled in the cage. I had all the technique. I've worked so hard. I've done all the right things, but I never had coaches or the right advice to really line things up, like diets and everything else that comes along with fighting, like the publicity, the not having so much income, like all those kind of battles, and it was just things that I was not really focused in the game, I was more kind of in and out with it. And I had family kind of people started making big bucks, doing real estate, doing other things, and they were like, hey man, you could have a house like this. And I was just like, man, it's not for me, I like fighting. I'm going to stick to it. I did all these part-time jobs because, even if you have a full-time job, they don't want you calling off. They don't want you traveling. So I was like, man, I can't find the right, balance. So then I started getting more into it. I watched that Michael Jordan documentary on looking at sports psychologists. So I started seeing a sports psychologist. I started seeing a therapist. I started talking more to my coaches, even my partner. It's just more of thinking out things and really seeing my path, of doing the right things, choosing the right schedule, the right fights, before I didn't have that. I was like, man, I'll fight anybody, I didn't really care. I was like, let's go. Gregor, who? I don't care. Let's go. I just didn't care, and I still don't, I never had that fear. I've always had that competitiveness. I'm gonna study. I'm gonna do film. I never used to do film. I stole that film work from John Jones. I started seeing all these other great athletes. And I just started picking little things and what really worked with me. Not everything worked with me. And I was in a big church guy, but then I always started being a more church guy and listening to the messages and pulling what I can fit into my schedule that week, because every week is a new message, a new kind of thing going on. So I was like, man, it's just, I was just started finding a great flow. And now, I feel like I found something.
That's fascinating, man. What do you think is feeding that? I'm always fascinated by, the sport and how it tends to change people. Is it the fight game that is changing you, or is it your willingness to kind of want to be better in all different aspects of the sport. You know what I mean? Because if you fight long enough, you're like, okay, I got to get better at this, and that. And you start looking outside of yourself. How else can I get better? So what is feeding what?
I feel like it's, I think it was more of just like this competitiveness that was being fed on, you know, like I'm always like, I'm from Chicago, Illinois, you know, everybody competes over everything, you know, who's got the better car, the better shoes, the better anything. So I wanted to be that one person who was like the better fighter, you know, the better guy in the area, you know, the guy who's making the most noise. So I had that going up. But I think what really changes, like the sport really changes by like, you have to be very disciplined, you know, you have to be all in, you know, like it's crazy. I meet a lot of athletes who weren't all in, you know, who had like side jobs doing other things, and suddenly they quit their jobs and they're all in, and suddenly they're in the UFC doing other things. So then I was like, man, like, I think I wasn't all in, you know, like I didn't have the cornermen to talk to. I didn't have like the people around me. It was a very lonely sport. And then I started losing. So I got even lonelier, you know, like coach, even some of the big top coaches started charging like crazy. Like it just, you know, that you have to know, like you have to find your footing in the game. And I just felt like I had to be more, you know, disciplined. You know, I was chasing the dream since I was 9 years old, but nobody's telling you what to do along the way. You know, like I just found out like about like savings and all this crazy stuff. You know, like you just I'm like 30 years old, and I'm like, damn, I got to do all this like paperwork too for the UFC. Like it's just insane. Like you start getting all these reality checks. You know.
What does this fight, you know, you had obviously an amazing debut. Like, what does this do for you now as you look forward, you know, in your UFC career? Like, not everyone has a fight like that in the UFC. And, you know, how do you kind of keep your head together, and what does this do for you motivation wise as you look forward?
Well, I feel like those losses I have had, you know, have really, you know, like woken me up in a lot of ways. Like we can't fuck around in this game, you know, like you have to take it serious. You know, every fight is like, you have to take it like your last, you know. I felt that kind of way. Even if I, you know, won or lost, you know, I've learned how to like still pick myself up, you know. Even the losses, I was like, you know, I'll show them next time, you know. He won't win next week. That's all I know, you know. Like I've always just picked myself up, you know. And it was, I don't know. It was all anime too, like Dragon Ball Z, you know. There was like characters losing and then they would power up and then come back. And then it was just like, man, like I want to be like that, you know. I just want to be a known fighter. And like you guys were just saying earlier, like, yeah, man, it's a pretty like cool time to like jump into the MMA world right now and be in the UFC. You know, we get bonuses, we got a lot more publicity, you know, everything's on ESPN. So like my family back in Mexico know what I'm doing, you know. It's awesome, you know. I'm glad how much the sport has grown.
Chepe Mariscal with us here on the Anik and Florian podcast, and I do expect there will be a discretionary bonus of some kind coming your way, even though you didn't get the fight of the night. I actually think when we talk about the fights of the year on the Anik and Florian podcast, sometimes beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and some people felt like at times the fight wasn't overly technical, perhaps because of Trevor, who knows, right? I think your fight's going to be one that we're talking about come the end of the year. But Khamzat Chimaev always talked about wanting a war in the UFC, and he finally got it against Gilbert Burns. You get essentially a war in your UFC debut. What were your thoughts on that fight with Trevor Peek when you went back home and watched it back?
Well, I was pretty surprised because he had a good chin on him. You know, I hit him with a lot of good things, a lot of sharp stuff. But I'm glad like I said, my corner kept me very focused. You know, they were like, man, like I'm used to guys going out like after those shots, you know, like and that's the thing that you have to be trained as a fighter too. Like, even if your sharp stuff don't work, like you got to just keep just adding on that sharp stuff, you know, like, and I looked at it as like a video game, you know, like you keep attacking those hard spots, you know, and then, you know, eventually you'll get something. I didn't get anything, but man, more happy to explain a little taste of who I am, you know, in 10 days notice against an opponent. Like, I didn't have any sparring partners who punched like him, you know, like it was wild. Like, that's why I couldn't see some punches. They were like loopy. Some were like, if he was stabbing me, you know, it was just like, man, it was like
stabs, like downward hammer fists. And I got to say, watching your partner, Claire Guthrie, who's also a fighter, and Valor Caballero, your head coach, right? Watching them sort of watch you after the fact when seemingly the result was in the cam. We knew you were going to win the fight. It was just really cool to watch that moment. But I guess what I most took away was something you touched on earlier in our conversation, just this fearlessness. Like, you don't give a shit in terms of like the setting or the stage or the opponent. And I don't know if that's because you were fighting guys like Gregor Gillespie and Bryce Mitchell when you didn't have what amounted to an optimal training camp, but why were you so ice water in the veins, calm, cool, collected? I know you've credited your corner with keeping your head in the game, but why were you able to sort of rise to this occasion through a wild fight in a UFC debut when a lot of people kind of crumble in that setting?
I have that dog in me, man. It's just, it's like that in Chicago, dude. You can't just go up to somebody and, you know, like square up with anybody because you don't know who you're fighting, you know? So I felt like I always had that chip on my shoulder where I'm like, man, I'm going to be the best, but competitively, you know, like not outside the cage. I'm not like an asshole or I don't give a fuck what's going on. You know, like it's more of like, man, in the cage, like, this is my domain, you know. I've been doing this since I was small. This is the dream, right. You know. I feel so like when I was walking out, everybody was like, "Man, did you like go into shock? Like, did you get nervous or anything?" I was like, "Nah, I'm home. This is where I belong. This is what, you know. This is what I love to do. I hope the UFC loves it too, you know." And I was just like, "Man, I'm all in, you know, all in."
Well, there are a lot of people that deserve credit for your success. You yourself, chief among them, first and foremost, but your late mother, who I know wanted you to continue with this initiative, and you're certainly reaping the rewards. Before I let you go, so you have mentioned since the fight that you could conceivably compete in 3 divisions. Now, you were able to accept this opportunity up at 155 pounds. You have flirted, at least verbally, with going down to bantamweight, but are we to assume that your next contracted fight in the UFC will be featherweight? Is that where you think your wheelhouse ultimately is going to be?
Yeah, for sure. Like it would be fun to go, you know, it's because of my height, you know, I'm like 5'7", and I see these 35ers who are like, you know, 5'11", and I'm like, man, maybe if I get some help from like the UFC, the PI, you know, like some like more science, you know, into it. I was doing a lot of like, you know, these diet programs and stuff like that. And I was just not feeling myself so good. Like being at a lower weight class, like I walk around and train at 165. So I like to stay a little big, but I try to get like during like 5 weeks for featherweight, I'll go down to like 155, 154, you know? So whatever, man, I just like, you know, I'm open to the competitiveness, you know, like why not? You know, there's guys that's a 2 champ, why not a 3 champ? You know, like
I love it.
You know, like start that conversation. That'd be cool if some other people, you know, accomplish that dream, you know. And at 55, like I said, I've fought there before. I obviously took the shot, 10 days notice. You know, I feel like that's fighters that want to be in the UFC, they have to be ready like that. You know, 10 days. I've taken a 145 championship belt fight in 5 days notice. And I won that. I was just like, man, okay, everything's preparing me for, you know, the big show with the UFC, you know? So I felt like, 145 is good. And then if I go to the PI or whatever, or find this nutritionist to like, you know, test all my stuff and then go like, hey man, you could touch 35. And then might as well try it, you know?
All right, well, it's not just Bilal Muhammad making waves in Chicago, Illinois, Chepe Mariscal. And you may want to connect actually with Bilal and use Chef Ian Larios. For my money, he's the best in the business. A lot of good guys out there, the fight dietitian, but Chepe Mariscal doing big things. Congrats on a huge week for you and your son and Claire and the family. And we appreciate a few minutes today. I'm sure I'll see you in a few months back in the Octagon.
Sounds good, man. Thank you, guys.
Congrats,
right, there he is. Chepe Machine Gun Mariscal with us here on the Anik and Florian podcast. Crazy, man. Gregor Gillespie, Bryce Mitchell, Sean Soriano, Steve Garcia, Joe Anderson Brito. fought all those guys. Now, yes, he lost to all of those guys pre-UFC, but man, is he ready now that he's here. And I do look forward to seeing him down at 145 pounds. I forgot to ask him about the wiffle, but it looks like he's had a haircut since he competed in Jacksonville. All right, that's going to do it for today. Plenty more where that came from later in the week, though. We will have a full UFC 290 preview with predictions coming up on either Wednesday or Thursday on the DraftKings Network. Thank you to Ray Longo and, of course, the man you just heard from, Chepe Mariscal. Thanks to every one of you for listening, for watching, for subscribing to the DraftKings YouTube channel. You can also find us on that DraftKings Network. And don't forget, live episode of the Anik and Florian podcast from UFC X this Friday, July 7th, 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific. Our producer is Cody Merrill. With that, for Ken Flo, I'm John Anik. Thank you all for listening, for watching. We will see you in a few short days. Until then, yo fucking later.